Okay, welcome back to episode 3 of the Wedding Capture Co podcast. This is episode 3, but it's take 2 because we've already tried it once.
Which hopefully means that you'll get the best stuff now, because we've already spoke about it for nearly 40 minutes to realise that our new kit wasn't recording. So yeah.
Yeah, we've got a bit of new kit. We're obviously going to have some teething problems, but this is our second time of doing it. But that means you're going to get the best stuff from us.
I really hope so. But yeah, so welcome guys back. If you listened to our previous 2 episodes, as Chris said, this is episode 3, and we are Wedding Capture Co, a podcast for wedding photographers and videographers, with me, Tom, who's the photo side, and Chris, who is our video maestro.
Yeah, exactly. And we just wanted to try and give back some of the knowledge we've learned over the last few years of doing wedding photography and videography. And today we want to talk about finance, which is going to be a bit of a heavy topic, to be honest. We don't want to really go into numbers and things like that. We want to talk about some of the things that we've learned in terms of managing your finance and how that does affect your business. But first, it's been a few weeks since we recorded the first batch of episodes. It's probably been a month, is it?
About that, I guess. Obviously, our episodes go out every 2 weeks. For those of you guys that are new here, so we record them in 2s. So yeah, so it's been about a month. Yeah, and since then, I've shot my first weddings of the year. Obviously, when we recorded our first episodes, the first one was all about getting ready for your season, of which we both were. And I've shot 3 weddings since then. Obviously, the last of which was this Friday just gone, where we worked together, didn't we, with the lovely Caroline and Christian?
Yeah, that was really good. And it had been, up until then, a bit of a washout for me. I'd had a couple of rainy weddings, one where it was a bit like cloudy and a bit sketchy. And then for Caroline and Christian, the sun was out. Like it was almost like a summer's day, just a little bit chilly.
It really was, wasn't it? It didn't feel like an Easter wedding at all. So
No.
yeah, we're sat here the week after Easter, and their wedding was Good Friday, and it felt like summer. It was warm, it was sunny. I think because we were outdoors, we were at a barn as well in the middle of the South Downs. It just felt dreamy. It was so good.
Yeah, and it gives you a boost for the season, I think. Our first wedding it hammered it down. The couple were lovely, photographers loved it. Everything was so good, but it hammered it down. It was like, wow, okay, this is a good start, sort of thing. And then the second was exactly the same, and it just went from there. But I feel like, even though we'll say to couples, it doesn't matter if it rains on the wedding day. It doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to ruin the day, and that is 100% true. For us, obviously, we get our creativity through having options.
Yes.
And if you're stuck inside in a small little room and you're trying to figure out how to sort of get the gallery looking better or the video looking better, you've really got to sort of those creative sort of cogs have got to be turning.
Yeah, and I feel like as well that in those kind of elements or those wetter days, that you become kind of photographer, videographer, emotional support / hype man as well.
Yeah.
So I think there's always an air of like a little bit of disappointment from them, especially when I know I can only speak for myself. That obviously, like the golden hour and sunsets are such a huge selling point to my business, and a reason that a lot of people book me. That if you're at a venue that has scope for a good sunset and then it's wet or grey, there's always that little air of disappointment of kind of what could have been. So I feel like it's also my job to not only then dig deep, make a really nice gallery for them with the day that they had and the weather they have, but also kind of make them not feel bummed out about it. Kind of like, what else can I give them? So it's like, oh, you didn't have the sunset, but we can do this, or kind of ways to kind of bring it back round for them, so that it always ends on a positive note and they have a great experience.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's an episode to be had on like rainy weddings or what to do in limited situations. I think, because that is what makes us who is. It's not the amazing weddings at the amazing venues that makes us who we are. It's maybe the smaller ones or the rainy one, and how we sort of react to those sort of situations. And I think, you can make the most of it. You're obviously disappointed, but imagine what the couple's feeling. It was raining that whole day. You've got to then be the one to be like, actually, no, don't worry, we can do this. And
exactly that. And I think, you don't learn a lot when everything goes well. If everything always goes your way, you don't grow. It's those days where it doesn't go well, but you still manage to pull it out the bag. They have a great time. They still love their gallery, and you feel, do you know what? I've really made some growth here and managed to make that despite everything else that was chucked at us.
Yeah, exactly.
But
I've already got a boost now from Friday. Friday
was great, wasn't it? Like we were really spoiled as well. Like Caroline and Chris just treated us well. So you were there with your lovely wife Kate, and we were sat on a table for dinner as well, weren't we? So I bought these guys a gin and tonic. I had a beer. We sat at the end of the table. We had barbecue.
Such a
we
vibe,
had a drink. The sun was shining. It didn't feel like work, did it?
It was just like everything that we're about. Just like, it was casual. Like everyone was just like having a good time. It was not too Dutch traditional. It was just really exciting. I had beer pong in the evening, which was lit up by like the amazing sunset that was about to happen. Like it was just everything just sort of fell into place, didn't it? So, every now and then that will happen.
And I think that's it. If you can try and get, I think if you had those every weekend, you take it for granted.
Yeah.
But to have that, I think, and where it's been so wet for so long as well, it really felt like these are the days. Like this is what I've been waiting for. Like in that moment, everything had come together, and it was like 100% living the dream in this job.
But yeah, so that was the beginning of Easter weekend, and now I've been pretty knackered, to be honest, the last couple of days because I went up to the Lake District and I climbed Scaffold Park at the weekend, which wasn't too bad, to be fair. The actual act of climbing the mountain was what it was. It was more the travelling there. It took us 8 hours to get there, 9 hours of driving 2 days ago.
But driving's tiring. You forget that just how exhausting travelling is, let alone climbing a mountain in the middle of it. As I conquered a mountain of Easter eggs, and that was about as much as I achieved over the weekend, and went and seen some family. So to have nearly 15 hours of driving and climbing the second highest peak of the UK you've definitely got to.
I think mentally the driving was harder because of the traffic and stuff. I thought the mountain was fine. It was just those 18, 17 hours of driving or whatever.
The joys of UK roads and traffic.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so today we want to talk about finance and how to plan ahead for your year. The first thing I wanted to really talk about is how to start thinking about finance if you're in your early days of your business. And Max getting involved. So Max is our podcast pet.
He's our podcast annoyance. All through the first take that we didn't actually record, he laid to sleep like a dream. But now that we're into set take 2, the ball's come out and he wants to play games.
And this will be the one that's used. So
exactly that. So yeah, you'll become familiar with Max.
But yeah, so when you're first getting into business, I think as photographers and videographers, we get into this business because we're good at using cameras and producing those photos and videos, and you often forget about some of the really sort of nitty gritty admin bits, and one of those is finance. And so I think it's really important to set these boundaries that we're about to talk about straight away. Don't sit on it. Don't be like, oh yeah, I'll do photo and video for a year and then I'll start sorting out my tax and that later on. Do it as soon as you possibly can, because this is going to be your foundation for your business, essentially.
Exactly that. And I think it's these principles which are maybe the less glamorous side of what we do, but these are the foundation that will allow you to have a business and keep having a business for many years to come, rather than kind of getting into it going, oh, I'm making all this money from photographing weddings, and then not being responsible or doing the right thing with that money to allow it to carry on to be a job, and then get to a point where you fall into money troubles with it, or the money doesn't tie up and you have to go back to that day job, which is what nobody wants.
Yeah, exactly. And the first part of that comes from knowing what you need to do in order to pay your bills, your whatever it is, your rent, your mortgage, and live the life that you want to live. So you need to really set aside, this is how much I need to earn this year in order to do everything I want to do and pay off my bills and live, basically. And that was particularly important for me when I worked full time before this, because I wanted to obviously figure out how many weddings I would need to do at the price that I was charging in order to go full time. And whilst I did that, I then, as soon as I went full time, stopped doing that. And that led me to take too many weddings in 2019 because I didn't have that target. And I just carried on taking them, thinking, yeah, I need weddings. And I didn't.
Yes.
And then that causes backlog and stress and makes you hate your job. And this is why this finance thing is really important.
Definitely. And I think that's probably a really good point to touch on, is that making that first leap, like both of us came from previous jobs into this. We never kind of, left education straight into becoming full-time freelance. So there's always going to become that point where it feels like a big step, because you've got this kind of full-time regular wage, and then you've maybe been doing your weddings on the weekends and stuff. And so you've kind of got the benefits of bit of both, and maybe at that point your wedding money is a bit more kind of pocket money or money for the nice things, because your day job's holding down the boring stuff like your mortgage and your food. But to get to that point where you need to make it pay for everything, I think that's a really good point to say, to have a plan to go, in order to leave my job I need to have this amount of money, and start to get into that mindset of, this job doesn't just pay for the nice things anymore. It now needs to become not just a fun thing, or a side hustle or whatever you want to call it. It needs to become my actual job. And in order for it to be a job, you need to pay taxes and save for a new equipment and all of those other things that come with it.
Yeah, and it can go two ways. You can either be quite relaxed about it and completely forget that needs to pay your bills as well, or you can go into panic mode And when you go full time, you just take everything, and you're just like,
Yes.
right, I need to, now I'm full time, I need to just take everything I possibly can. And that's why what's important is knowing your numbers, right?
Yes. I mean, that's the biggest foundation, the biggest takeaway from all of this is just know the numbers around your business. And I'm not saying you have to be super nerdy and have them, written out all the time and know exactly all the pence and pounds, but
You do.
roughly. I think, I wouldn't be able to tell you to the penny what it cost me to do a wedding.
Yeah.
But I know that with all of the things considered, that it costs me roughly what it costs me to do that job. So that I know that I know how much my mortgage is a year and all the rest of it, how much money I need to make to survive, and then how much money I need for my business to thrive. I think that's
exactly. And not to get into the nitty gritty of it too much, but we were talking about in the first draft of this.
Yes.
We were talking about putting aside finances for your monthly payments and your yearly payments. Everything's a subscription service these days, and you don't realize until you sort of go in and look at everything that you're paying for, quite how much expenses you have that are just needed. For videographers, we obviously have music licenses and insurance and drone sort of situations that we've got to pay for yearly and things like that. And then you've got to upgrade your gear, repair your gear and things like that. So when you're looking at your sort of yearly finances, don't just look at the bills that you've got to pay on a personal level. Write down, for me, I've got a spreadsheet where I have all of the monthly payments written down and all the yearly payments written down, and then it splits the whole total into 12 months, and I just pay that amount in each month so that I'm never caught out with that. But sometimes you sort of lose track of how many things you are spending the money on, and so you can end up spending money on things that you don't need, right?
And it's all those things that you have to consider, I think, when you come to that number of finding out how much per wedding costs you to do. If you have a target of, say, 30 weddings a year and your insurance for the year is £300, you know that you need to take, this is where I'm going to fall down the maths here, so that roughly that insurance costs you £10 per wedding. That's right, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
£10 times 30, £300. Yeah. So you end up that way. So that's how you need to know that you take the £10 for your insurance. If your public liability is the same, or your online gallery subscription is the same, you need to take the figure that costs you per year and divide it by the amount of weddings you want to do. It's not just, I need 20 quid of fuel to get there and some money for a USB at the end, and that's the cost for the wedding. It's the bigger picture of everything. You turn up with a camera that costs you money, and the more you use it, the more it's going to depreciate. You need to buy a new one, and if that one breaks, you need to buy a new one in a hurry. So you can't just, you need to make sure that you are actively saving towards that, so that that you are effectively running your business, not just kind of scraping through from month to month as the weddings kind of roll in.
There's nothing worse than being caught short when something breaks and you haven't got the savings to then replace it. But then at the same time, if you are just starting, then you're gonna think of it as percentages rather than amounts. For me, it's pretty much 60% that I give myself. Everything else goes towards different things like savings and taxes and pensions and things like that. I only keep a certain percentage to myself, and that brings me to sort of the workflow situation. We have workflows in our videography and our photography in terms of editing and what we do with the couples and stuff, but a financial workflow is really important, like having your spreadsheets that tell you how many weddings you've got and the money that's going to bring in, having the spreadsheet that tells you what your outgoings is and what you need to earn each month in order to survive. And having that workflow can bring you from being a sporadic business person, just taking whatever, to having a real plan.
And I think one of the things is it's so easy, because if you worked at a normal job, there'd be a HR department and they sort your tax out and just hand you what your take home is at the end of every month. But because we're self-employed and we take our own money in and have to manage our own finances, is that it's really easy to get to the end of the summer and be like, I'm rich, I've got all this money, because you are holding on to your tax money for the year, your national insurance money for the year, all of those things as well. And you have to keep that, and it's sit there in a pot thinking, I've got this money, knowing that is going to come out in a few months' time and you need the money for that. So if you go and spend it on a super lavish holiday, that when the tax man rears his head in January and wants 20% or whatever the final figure is, that you've got it pretty much sat there.
Yeah.
Where I think it's really easy when you're in a job to kind of have that money given to you, and that level of self-control is is taken away because you know whatever, to a degree, whatever comes in is yours to spend.
They've taken everything out before you even
Yes.
get it.
So I think almost like you said, having your workflow, that workflow that you build at the start of the year gives you those boundaries and almost acts as your HR department.
Yeah.
So kind of the spreadsheet goes, no, this is yours, and that bit's for somebody else. And if you never think of that 40% as yours in the first place because it gets squirreled away via the workflow, it makes it kind of normalizes you into the same maybe pool as the employed, rather than us as our self-employed getting paid everything.
Yeah, exactly. And there are tools out there to help you do it, like Monzo accounts. I think Starling does the same with little pots. They can automatically put a certain amount for tax, or you can do it yourself. I do it myself because I'm sometimes transferring money between accounts and things like that. So I don't like the fact it does it automatically. But yeah, so there's little pots that help you, put money into like a tax pot or like a bills pot or something like that. And so having that workflow where you do sort of designate a certain amount of money is really important to have from the start, I think.
Yes.
Don't just go in for a year and just be like, oh, I'm just going to smash out some photos and videos and I'll sort out all the finance stuff later. Do that from the start. And if you know your numbers, you will start to increase in price quicker, I think.
I think so. Or you'll begin to see that in order to grow, I need to do this in my business, but that costs X amount. So in order for that to happen, the money needs to raise up. And I think you can look at things much more kind of pragmatically in terms of finance, rather than it being kind of emotionally driven of, oh, I'm making nice work now, or I'm booking faster, I can just put my price up. You begin to see that need or that worth there from the business side as well as from the creative side.
Yeah, knowing your value is important, I think, as well. Is knowing how much it costs you to do your job, but also how much you are worth. If someone's getting 30 inquiries a month and they're booking in 10 of them, I think that's too many.
Yeah.
That you shouldn't really be booking in that many. Obviously, it's individual, right? But at that point, you can think, I could raise my prices. You could raise your price by a few £100. If you get 5 bookings that month, you've probably made the same amount.
Yes.
Or a similar amount. So it's knowing your value and how much. And this is everything. Don't look at other people and what they're charging.
Definitely, that's a big one.
Because every situation, I think it's like we were saying before. I think it's useful to be aware of your competition and how much people in your area are charging. But I don't think you can judge how much you should charge based on that, because they could be spending a lot more money on marketing. They could be, their home situation could be a lot different. They could be targeting a whole different audience to you. There's so many things that they could be doing differently to you, or a different situation that they could be in. So if you're charging £2,000, you're looking at someone that's £5,000, and being like, I'm not charging that person could be spending that £3,000 on marketing quite easily, on Google ads and Facebook ads and things like that. So don't look at how much value clients are putting in you, and how much clients are booking you for. And like I said, if you're booking too many, that's the time to raise your prices. If you're not booking enough, don't necessarily lower them, but you're clearly maybe needing to put more into that.
Yeah, and I think it all becomes a work in progress. I think by nature, I feel that I spent too long at lower prices and shooting more weddings. Where now, as I've got older, I know that physically, in order to give in the way that I want to my couples, I want to put more into those weddings. But thus, by doing that, I can't go and shoot 3 and 4 weddings in a weekend anymore, or I can't go and do 12 in a month, because physically I couldn't manage that and get the work out. So naturally, the price is driven up, which allows me then to give that much to those couples so I can shoot less weddings. And I feel like that model alone has got an episode in it. But having an idea of progression of, when you first start out your business, you're naturally probably going to want to shoot more weddings just to get some experience under your belt, and also to find out the type of weddings that you want to shoot. But naturally, in the beginning, you will be at a lower price point because you have less of a portfolio to share to achieve higher finance weddings. But it's just a case of keeping a weathered eye on where you want your business to go and where you're at in your business, so that you don't spend too long on those lower rungs of the ladder, and it allows you to climb them at a much steadier rate, rather than feel that I did, where I kind of hung around at the bottom of the ladder for a little bit too long, and I'm now trying to climb, later in my business.
Yeah, I feel like I did the same as you. With the 50 weddings I did in 2019, I obviously did them at a lower price, right?
Yeah.
And if I just did less weddings in that year, I could have still grown at the same pace. I didn't need to do that many weddings. Exactly. A lot of them I didn't show, that sort of thing. So, but that came from just bad financial management. And obviously different things will work for everyone, right? So you, like Tom said, like you can be. It's quite a seasonal job.
Yeah.
So in the summer we're going to be minted, and in the
Yeah.
winter we're going to be poor, right? So the right thing to do, or the sensible thing to do, is to put money aside for the winter and try and spread out, like maybe give yourself a wage that you pay yourself each month, and as long as you've got that in a savings account for 6 months worth of that wage, then you're sorted. But for me, I was never really able to wrap my head around spreading that income across the year.
And I think it works, like you said, differently for everybody. I think there are schools of thought where, when we spoke about them, kind of the payday millionaire that sits there at the start of the summer going, oh, I'm rich, and can spend lots of money and then worry their way, or kind of survive the winter scraping on the, kind of the depths of their savings account.
That was me.
And then for me, I was the other way, where I was doing all this work in the summer, and I maybe should have been going, oh, I need a holiday because I'm tired, because I've shot these weddings. And I was so fearful that the taxman was going to come and take all of it, because I had no less visibility over that I was fearful and didn't spend it. And then kind of until I'd got to the end of the year, I'd shot all the weddings, so no one needed refunding. I'd paid my big tax bill. Then I was kind of like, okay, now I feel that I can spend some of this money. And that's not a good way to be either, because I felt like I was doing lots of work, but getting very little reward for it. And so I think having the structure in, like we've said, it allows for both of those personalities to kind of be put across a level that it kind of makes your money more consistent, rather than having that kind of pyramid graph, if you can see it, where June's in the middle, where you've come from January at nothing to being rich in the summer, and then being brassic by Christmas. Yeah.
So what do you think? What do you think that if people are feeling a little bit sort of reluctant to spend, like you say you were, what do you think people can put in place to get around that?
As soon as I started to say financial forecast sounds maybe too much of a fancy word, but once you can start to see how many weddings you want in the year, I know between that 12 months period I was going to get paid X amount. So depending on when money would come in, I'll take my money from my clients a month before the wedding. It kind of leveled itself across, and then even though the money would start to build up in my account in the summer, I would still pay myself a consistent wage, which I knew was manageable against the money that was coming in. And then at the end of the year, if there was a large amount of money left, I'd still been paying myself what was a reasonable wage. That's and then once my tax bill was paid, I knew that I maybe had some money then to give myself a bonus, which was a nice place to be at the end of a year. That was kind of my reward for working hard. But at the same time, I still knew that I was paying myself a consistent wage, and whether it was January or whether it was July, I was still getting that same wage every month.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think financial forecast is the way forward. That sort of thing is the way forward. And be careful not to put together a wedding forecast. There is this thing in the industry, especially this year, where it's been maybe a bit of a tougher year. Definitely, for a lot of suppliers, because maybe just less weddings happening, cost of living, who knows really. But this year I've seen a lot of questions online just saying, how many weddings do people have this year? And in my opinion, that's the silliest question, because it doesn't matter, because someone who's charging 10 grand who's got 10 weddings is completely different to someone who's charging $1.5 grand has got 10 weddings. So you shouldn't be asking how many weddings you got this year. You should be asking, I don't know, what's the percentage of revenue gone up or down this year? That should be sort of the question that people ask.
Are you half booked for this year? Are you 3/4 booked for this year? I think that's a better gauge of how many weddings you need and as to how well that their avenues are going. But I think the biggest takeaway from all of that is, it's nice to know that other people are struggling, so that you're maybe not doing anything wrong. But at the same time, if I'm fully booked for the year and you've got nothing, my revenue isn't going to pay your bills. So you need to, in some ways, in the same way with your work, is stay in your lane and focus on your business.
Yeah.
It's nice to have a weathered eye on your competition, to know that if things are quiet for you, you're not the only one.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you need to look at things that work for you and your business. Because, say, the guy who's the 10 grand wedding photographer, his marketing tactics and avenues will be very different to you as the £1,500 wedding photographer, because you would think that a lot of his clients that have those budgets are far more feeling the pinch of the cost of living than the people that get married at the £1,500 end.
Yeah.
And so it's knowing your client, knowing how many you need to book, as to at what point do you go, okay, maybe I need to run an offer, or I don't need to, and keep an eye on your bookings. I think sometimes through busy booking times, I even find sometimes where I go, I've got some calls this week, I've got this, and then 2 or 3 people will book. and then it doesn't quite catch up in my brain.
Yeah.
So someone said to me, "Oh, well, how many have you got?" And when I look, I'm like, "Oh, I've got 4 more than I thought I had." And
Yeah.
at that point, I was like, "Oh, if I had half booked, maybe I'd look at raising my prices." And I've actually gone past that and maybe done some other weddings just because
Yeah.
it's keeping an eye on. You know, you don't have to spend days and days checking and doing, you know, huge Excel things and checking your finances, but you need to always have that little check-in, maybe at the beginning of the week or the beginning of the month, and saying, how am I doing?
Yeah.
You know, has that gone out yet? Or and keeping an eye on the direct debits that are coming out of your account as well, so you don't get caught out for, you know, for things that you maybe forgot you subscribed to. Or I did it during the pandemic. I signed up to some education where, you know, they were offering a free month to this education avenue, and if you didn't cancel it though, then you got billed for the year.
Yeah, they're the worst. Yeah.
And so I got caught like that. Oh, you know, I use the resource. 2 days later, you know, £300 comes out my account, which I really could have done without at that time.
Wow.
And although I had the access for the rest of the year to that resource, it
You
was
might
still
not have done
£300 I didn't need to spend
Yeah.
during the middle of a pandemic when my income was a lot lower.
Yeah, I think you're right in keeping an eye on things, and we've already mentioned keeping an eye on outgoings, but keeping an eye on incoming and how many weddings you've got is quite important as well.
Yeah.
Because, like you say, sometimes January and February tend to be quite busy for bookings, I've found.
Yeah.
And we found this pretty much the same as you. Like, so at some point in February, I looked at bookings for 2024 and I was like, that's quickly catching up to 2023, and I didn't even realise it. Better quickly raise my prices, otherwise I'm just going to end up shooting way beyond the target.
And I think that forecasting as well, particularly in the industry that we're in, where you do book work in so far in advance, is that you need to keep an eye on where you are in your business and what you're charging for those future years. Like at the moment, I am actively not taking 2025 inquiries. I've had some, but I've always said to those people, as I'm sorry, at the moment, I'm not accepting bookings for that far in advance. Because purely from a financial point of view, I do not know where the world is going to be in 2 years' time.
Definitely.
And if I take an inquiry in April 2023 for October 2025, how can you accurately...
And inflation goes up to like 30%.
Let's say if inflation goes through the roof, or, you know, I end up having a vast upturn in popularity and want to massively raise my prices in 2 years' time, and I've got that booking that I took in at my 2 years ago price.
Yeah.
But I think the bigger picture of that as well is, it comes back to knowing your worth, is that if you are making work that you are happy with now, stop and look at the work that you made 2 years ago.
Yeah. Oh, that's huge. Yeah.
Because the couple that are trying to book you for 2 years' time
I'm not
are
getting you
seeing
now.
your work now. And they're not seeing, because you haven't made it yet, the work that you've made in 2 years' time. And as long as you are always progressing and building, is that you need to see the value in future you, to know that, do you know what, by the time I come to shoot their wedding in that far in advance, they are going to be getting a vastly different photographer to the one that's standing in front of them now.
Yeah, that is huge. Yeah, you will be upgrading your equipment, your knowledge will be improved, and your style, you know, might have changed or improved as well. You might be doing like, you know, in a couple of years, you might be doing more destination weddings for really high-end couples and stuff, and then you've got to go back to this like gammy hotel somewhere because you've taken this booking too early when you were doing
leading on from that, I think as well is sometimes if I take bookings roughly anywhere between a year and 18 months, I'm quite happy with that. But if someone wants to start to book me 2 years plus in advance, for me it's almost an alarm bell. I think because if someone is having to book their wedding that far in advance, it normally, and again I am generalising here, comes down to cost. If they're booking a nice venue and they need 2.5 years to pay that venue off, they're expecting so much out of that venue alone, or they are having to budget their wedding so tightly that they need 2 years to pay it off.
Yeah, I feel like this is a bullet point note to put in our pricing episode.
Yes, definitely.
Is the expectation of, let's say you charge $2,000, one person's going to be expecting the world for $2,000.
Yeah, and the person that books you 6 months out for $2,000, go, oh, I've got that, it's fine, good photographer. They treat you differently, and there are affordability in all price brackets, and what $2,000 means to somebody will mean very different to somebody else. So don't think that the price that you are always defines the weddings that you are going to get, but you need to, in order to have a future in your photography, is not only have a mind on what you are booking for the here and now, it's for managing yourself in 2 years' time. Yeah,
exactly. And how I do that is, again, I don't want to get in too much into nitty gritty, but I've got a little spreadsheet, and down the left it says all the weddings that I've got, so like the names of the couples. At the top you've got the months, and then I sort of say how much they pay and whatever. And at the bottom it will tell me pretty much how many weddings I've got and how much I'm earning so that year. And in theory, I guess this is different for everybody and what they want to do, but the aim was for the wedding amount to get less and the money amount to either go up or stay the same, basically. So eventually, you know, I want to hit whatever's probably like, I'd say like 30, and I want to stay at 30 every year, but then just the income just increase. And I guess that's the goal for most people. It's not the goal for everyone. Some people might still want to do 50 and charge double the amount, but
and I think that's it. And once you start to get to those levels, there's probably a whole episode to be had where you do need to start to look at business models. Is that once you start to creep towards VAT and things like that, obviously that becomes another thing to consider then. When it comes down to kind of money, you're not just putting money by for the tax bill. Then, you know, you're looking at paying VAT once you kind of creep over that. Currently, I believe it's 84,000. And looking at that mark. That's something else to consider. But I think you say the goal for us, and going back to, you know, us talking about our weekends, I had a wedding on Good Friday, the one that we did together, and that was my only wedding this Easter. Where in previous years, I've shot doubles and triples over the entire Easter weekend. My family have been off doing Easter egg hunts and enjoying the sunshine and stuff, and I've been in the middle of a triple wedding season because I've needed to make, you know, to make the money that I've needed to run my business. Where over the years now that my price has crept up, my income has probably has increased less. You know, maybe I'm only earning £2,000 or £3,000 more than I was last year.
Yeah.
But that's for 10 less weddings than I shot last year. And I think once you can kind of get your head around things like that, it's huge. Because we're weekend workers, you know, or the weddings that we scope, most of them are in the weekends. You need to make sure, you know, that you have balance and stuff, and to be able to keep an eye on your numbers, to know that if a booking comes in and you don't really want to take it, you can look at it and go, do I need to take this?
Yeah.
Because you know your numbers, or you know what else you have in.
Definitely. And that comes to do with planning for your wedding season as well, which, shameless plug, is episode 1 of this podcast. If you go back to that, it's about how to plan for your wedding season, and that comes down to the Easter weekend thing that you were saying about having all of those crammed into the Easter weekend. Comes down to planning, right? Look at your weekends, figure out which ones you want off, which, if you can afford to do that, and then you won't end up in those situations where you're maybe doing one in one group and you've turned down one a month later because you've got, you know, you've now fully booked out for the year.
And I think moving on from that, like, and we're all kind of skirting around this bigger point of the whole thing of knowing your numbers and knowing where it is that as your business grows as well, you will get to a point where maybe, although you're shooting less weddings, there are still tasks in your business that you are not picking up. And if you're at a point where you need to outsource some of your stuff, whether that's to some AI software or to get a VA in to manage your inquiries, or I don't know, get a cleaner in to clean your studio so you don't have to do it, you need to know that money is there for that to happen. And if you keep an eye on your finances going forward, rather than drown in work, then you can go, okay, do you know what? Now I've got this extra bit of money coming in. I can afford to pay a bit more for my accountant. So they don't just do my tax return. They do my monthly bookkeep as well. So it's something less that I have to do. And, you know, that money is there, but you need to know that you can afford it before you pull the trigger on that new member of staff, or you buy that new camera or whatever. It all kind of leads around to just keeping the cogs turning and having a healthy cash flow through your business.
Yeah. And often the price of those things stays similar while you grow as well.
Yes.
I feel like for an accountant, that, you know, the price is going to stay similar while you're still growing. So an accountant might be better for someone who is, you know, VAT registered, earning like 150k or whatever, than someone who's earning 50k. Like for us, I was going to get into having an accountant versus not having an accountant, right? But for us, I feel like most of our outgoings and incomings are so simple in a lot of ways that it's just easy for us. We just go through it all at the end of the year, which is not the way to do it, by the way. But at the end of the year, we just go through our account, look at all the receipts and stuff, and just put them all into a spreadsheet, and we're done. But you know, the more complicated your business gets, the more you're going to need to enlist some help.
I think that's it. That's exactly it. And if you look at now, I think it's ever been easier to have that taken care of as well, you know, between Xero or QuickBooks or any of these kind of online like bookkeeping apps that there are out there. That most of my money comes in and out of one single account. I barely take any cash in my business, and for the most part, apart from, you know, odd kind of a USB order or an Amazon order for something, it's not like we're running shops where we have vast amounts of stock coming in and out to make that kind of invoicing process really simple. You don't have to have a float in your till like you would if you're a shop. So to keep an eye on your accounts, you know, it's kind of wedding payments coming in, money for subscriptions coming out, your wages coming out. It's like you say, it's a fairly
Consistent.
simple and pretty much repetitive thing over the course of the month. So it's not something that, you have to have loads and loads and loads of, you need to get a whole team in to deal with.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's not something that you can neglect because if the consequences because of that.
Yeah. I'd say in terms of tax and in terms of having an accountant, personally, I think at our level or pre-VAT level, you should have a certain knowledge of what you can claim, obviously how to submit your tax return, what you can and can't claim, and maybe have an accountant do your first couple so that you can get an idea of what within your personal situation and your business can you claim, how do you fill out that tax return, and after then you can pretty much, as long as you're learning from that process, you can pretty much do it on your own.
I think so, definitely. And I think also, but then within accounts, it's making sure that you have someone who works for you and charges you for what they are doing. Yeah. I know a couple of people that have got caught up, signing up to a big accountancy firm and paying a huge monthly thing because of going back to, like we said, with the kind of the fear or the paid in thing.
Yeah.
They were so scared that the tax man was going to, knock on their door and take everything they owned because they'd filled their return in wrong. They'd almost overpaid for their accountancy, where they were maybe paying for the level of service that a medium-sized business with 50 staff would pay, where we are predominantly one-man bands with one account, that something is fairly basic accountancy that you can only pay a fairly low level for. But the flip side is, I think that whatever you pay them, there should be a return on that. Like if you are doing your tax return, and I know I did mine for the first few years and probably didn't claim for things that I could have, so that to spend that £250 or £300 on an accountant, they saved me more than that in my tax return.
Yeah.
So that money was well spent.
The reality is, obviously, we're not financial advisors here, but
Far from it.
The reality is there's not a lot of information on the HMRC website about everything you can claim for. And the reason is, I think a lot of trust is given to people who are putting in their tax returns. And the trust is you will claim, a fair amount of whatever it is. I have been on holiday. I'll admit I've been on holiday where I've created content for my YouTube channel and stuff like that. So I guess, is it really a holiday? And then claimed some of that for tax. And it's perfectly acceptable. But like you say, you might not know that unless you get an accountant and they're like, but you did work over there.
And I think that's it. And it's like neither of us would stand here and try and make you fiddle the system at all. But at the same time, if there are things put in place for you to do those things, then I believe that you should take them.
Yeah.
And I remember chatting to a photographer a couple of years ago who didn't realise that if they were at a wedding, they travelled 100 miles away for their wedding, that if they weren't getting fed that day and they went to the bar and got themselves a sandwich, that they were allowed to put that on their account. Yeah. It's like you can't just walk to Tesco's at the end of your road and buy lunch every day because you're at work, because you are near home. But if you are travelling for work, and I believe it's a reasonable distance, you are entitled to claim for your food, and there are simplified expenses now for a lot of things like fuel and working from home, which never made it easier for you to do your own accounts.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many tools out there, which again is a whole other thing we could cover. There's tools, there's people you can get, there's education on both within HMRC, and I'm sure there's education that other people do based on tax returns as well.
Definitely.
But to put it into perspective and sort of round that side of things up, is I once got a accountant. I had an accountant at the very beginning just to tell me what I could and couldn't claim, give me a sort of they gave me a spreadsheet of things which I still use to this day to keep track of my accounts. And then sort of a few years later, I was like, I'm just going to hire someone just to make sure that I'm still doing it right. Yeah. I hired this person, paid them however much they charge, and they came back just saying, you're doing it. There's nothing else I can offer you. But I paid them just to tell me there's nothing else. So the moral of that story, I think, is that if you think you're on the right track, you're probably mostly on the right track.
I think that's it. There's having that balance of doing it, having enough knowledge so that you don't have that fear and lay in bed at night worrying that that you've claimed it wrong and that the tax man's going to come after you. But at the same time, it's not overpaying for things that you don't need to. And I think that's probably the biggest takeaway and the wrap up point from all of today. is knowledge is power with when it comes to your finances, and it's not just looking at the here and now, it's looking at the bigger picture for your future so that you can save well for things that crop up in your business, you pay yourself a fair wage, and you continue to grow with your business into the future.
100%. And we appreciate it's so boring, right?
Yeah.
But plan ahead, know your value, don't be afraid to ask for help. They're I think the main takeaways from this.
And I think if you can kind of keep chipping away and look at it, say maybe for half an hour once a month, that will stop you having to have that day in the lead up to January where you have to sit there and find invoices from months ago and do all of your accounts in a day, and then it takes 3 long days. You feel like, you know, it's the worst task in the world, and you question every life choice you ever made, and get into that point where kind of that prevention and just kind of little tasks along the way, if you take care of it like that, it will pay you back in the long run.
Yeah, look, it's never going to be ideal. Like, we've set a plan this year to maybe start doing a tax day, or not a day necessarily, but a tax couple of hours once a month. Yeah. Probably not going to happen, to be honest. It's not. We're not all perfect. It's not ideal.
But also, when we're photographers and filmmakers, if it's I could edit that really great wedding I shot on the weekend, or I could pour over an Excel spreadsheet for an hour, you know which one you're going to choose
exactly.
when it comes to it.
Exactly. But it's important to get that infrastructure in, and once that infrastructure is in, all you're doing then is maintaining it.
Yes.
So we hope this episode has been helpful. It's obviously, again, a bit more nitty gritty. We didn't want to get too much into numbers, more a case of what's actually going to help you going forward, I think. This has been the Wedding Capture Code podcast. Hopefully this has been helpful. Whatever you're listening to on, leave us a review, subscribe, do all of those things. I'm not really sure what the etiquette is.
Do all the things that you can find us for future episodes, and tell your friends so they can find us too. That's the main thing. And then next week, we're back with a largely more exciting episode, aren't we? I'm really looking forward to next week.
Yes. Next week we're talking about wedding receptions, which I'm excited to actually talk about the wedding day.
Yeah, it'd be nice to kind of, all the others are kind of have been quite theoretical or overviewed, where next week's is actually honing in on a certain part of the day and how we both approach it.
Yeah, so we're actually both looking forward to talking about something a bit more lighthearted. So
until then, we've been the Wedding Capture Co, and thank you.
See you in the next one.